a todos los que están acá presentes, agradecerles. Esta sesión va a tratar de... Vamos a tener las asociaciones regionales, vamos a tener representación de Alap, de la Asociación Europea de Población, con Helga Balk, de la Asociación Asiática de Población, con Harry Sananta, de la Asociación Africana de Población, que ya estará por llegar, y también, como decimos, del mundo a través de la IUSSP. Así que bueno, les pido, por favor, I beg you to control the time, because we don't want to be rude and cut you off. And we'll give you around 12 minutes to each of you, and then if Tom is able to make it, we'll give him a little bit more. So if you don't mind, I'll let you know 2 minutes before, okay, when it's the time, so maybe you can start rounding your ideas. Does that sound good? Okay, so nuestro primer panelista, Ignacio Pardo, de la Asociación Latinoamericana de Población. No sé en qué idioma vas a hablar, Nacho.
I would like to say thanks first, and then I switch to Spanish. But I'd love to say thanks once again to all my colleagues, because this is huge for Alap. It happened before. Sometimes we have sessions like this, but this time with every regional association, or with most regional associations in the world. I guess it's a big time we're having here, and then maybe it's also a first step to go on collaborating and discussing and connecting with each other. So thanks a lot, and let's keep in touch as much as we can. Well, I switch to Spanish. Lo que queríamos conversar hoy, estaba agradeciendo a nuestros colegas de las asociaciones de otras regiones, y lo que creo que puede ser de utilidad hoy es comentar dentro de la dinámica demográfica de cada región, cuáles son los desafíos de las asociaciones regionales. En el caso de América Latina, tenemos desafíos bastante específicos en el sentido de estar en una región con una transición demográfica avanzada en una cantidad muy importante de los países, pero también con una heterogeneidad importante entre países. Por tanto, en algunos todavía tenemos tasas globales de fecundidad de 3 o hasta 4 hijos por mujer, pero una cantidad muy importante. Y en la región como un todo, estamos ya en una etapa muy avanzada de la transición demográfica, con niveles de fecundidad por debajo del reemplazo. Eso, sumado a lo veloz que fue el proceso de transición en muchos países, y por tanto a lo rápido e impactante que fue el proceso de crecimiento poblacional, pienso en México, en Brasil, en los países grandes de la región, hace que nuestro contexto demográfico sea el, digamos, de estar muy marcado por procesos veloces y potencialmente problemáticos, o que pueden leerse como generadores de problemas, de desafíos. Esto además, y quizá acá está lo más específico de América Latina, está cruzado por una gran heterogeneidad de las poblaciones al interior de los países. Al punto tal que muchas veces se ha acuñado el término demografía dual, para mostrar esta doble dinámica relacionada con la desigualdad socioeconómica. Para los que trabajamos en temas de fecundidad, esto es muy evidente, por ejemplo, la edad del primer hijo, incluso en los temas de familia. Por tanto, estamos en una región donde los demógrafos, que solemos estudiar con los manuales que toman como ejemplo el modelo de la transición demográfica, tal como sucedió en los países del hemisferio norte, debemos contemplar que a nivel promedio de nuestras poblaciones suceden procesos similares, porque de hecho la demografía suele registrar procesos bien amplios que suceden a nivel prácticamente global, pero debemos contemplar además que en los países de América Latina esos promedios esconden comportamientos demográficos que a menudo son polares, son muy disímiles. Por ejemplo, hay una fecundidad adolescente todavía muy grande en un contexto de fecundidad total baja. Y eso es muy específico de América Latina. Si uno mira una población nacional de América Latina, probablemente parezca que son dos poblaciones distintas que están involucradas en el proceso. Una, la de los estratos socioeconómicos más pobres, con fecundidad adolescente alta, por ejemplo, y otra parte que posterga la edad del primer hijo de forma similar a como le hacen los mismos estratos en los países europeos o del hemisferio norte en general. Eso es, digamos, marca bastante la forma en cómo los demógrafos tienen que atender su objeto de estudio y los vincula fuertemente con las políticas públicas, con los problemas de discusión general. Y si bien estar cerca de las políticas públicas, de las discusiones globales, es algo propio de la demografía misma, desde la fundación de la disciplina, es cierto que hay diferentes énfasis en cómo se desarrolla la demografía académica en cada sitio. Y creo que en América Latina, la demografía académica, que tiene un impulso incipiente, está desde el comienzo muy vinculada a pensar los temas demográficos como posibles problemas a solucionar. El contexto institucional en el que sucede es sobre todo de universidades, no tanto de centros de investigación como podría haber en algunas otras partes, aunque también los hay. Está un poco alimentado por académicos que típicamente estudiaron en posgrados en los Estados Unidos o en Europa y regresaron. Pero en el contexto en el que estamos nosotros, la institucionalidad a nivel nacional en la que se desarrolla la demografía tiene esa peculiaridad de estar muy vinculado a instituciones universitarias donde hay, además de investigación, enseñanza y en muchos casos extensión también, lo que vuelve a vincular a los demógrafos con el contexto social. Como ven, los ejemplos que se me ocurren tienen el sesgo de lo que yo mismo estudio y les hablo de fecundidad y de edad del primer hijo, pero para migración vale lo mismo y para otros temas como la distribución territorial creo que también vale este enfoque genérico. En ese contexto tenemos una asociación regional que tiene su primer congreso en el 2004, que tiene bastantes fortalezas, pero creo que lo más interesante, y en realidad les confieso que yo estoy esperando las intervenciones de ustedes para saber cuáles son los desafíos que tienen las otras asociaciones. Lo más interesante me parece es mostrarnos al desnudo en nuestros problemas para conversar acerca de cuáles son las estrategias para hacer una mejor asociación regional en cada caso. Entonces, si bien tenemos algunas fortalezas, como les decía, creo que mantener nuestros congresos cada 2 años y tener una cierta identidad que hace que la gente se vincule a la asociación es un punto fuerte. Tenemos una revista académica que también tiene una vida dinámica y que funciona con números cada 6 meses. Tenemos ahora, acá le tengo que confesar a Tom, que copiamos el formato de NUSP, para hacer nuestro propio Alap. Y estamos tratando de difundir por allí también resultados de investigación más dinámicamente. Y en esos términos, digamos, de algunas publicaciones y de contacto en los congresos y de contacto con los socios, creo que tenemos algunas fortalezas. pero tenemos muchas debilidades, que es lo que les decía que quizá sea lo más interesante para charlar con ustedes. Una de ellas, y les debe pasar a muchas asociaciones, es, digamos, los problemas para mantener una vida intensa entre congreso y congreso. Nosotros tenemos casi como, digamos, la representación de Alap, 2 minutos, la representación de Alap, un encuentro cada 2 años. Y entre los congresos tenemos una vida que decae. Me gustaría muchísimo saber si hay estrategias que ustedes hayan pensado para mantener una vida intensa de la asociación aún entre los congresos. También tenemos redes de investigación que funcionan en algunos casos muy bien y en algunos casos se van debilitando. Y una de las cosas que estuvimos discutiendo incluso en la asamblea de nuestra asociación en la noche de ayer es cuál es el mejor formato. Nuestro formato de redes es de redes fijas, son unas 13 actualmente, que reportan a la asociación sus planes de trabajo de 2 años y luego, bueno, lo difunden y cuentan cómo les fue al final de ese periodo. Quizás no sea el mejor formato posible. La IUSSP, otra vez pensando en la IUSSP, tiene otras formas de mantener unidades temáticas. Sé que tengo que terminar, perdón, 1 minuto más y termino. Unidades temáticas que funcionan distinto, paneles, por ejemplo. Queremos saber, o sería bueno discutir, cuál es el mejor formato para pensar en las distintas asociaciones. También sería bueno que pensemos en qué medida conviene que las asociaciones publiquen libros, o sea, o qué tipo de libros cabe publicar, considerando que los incentivos para publicar en revistas siempre parecen superarlo todo. Y las 2 últimas cosas, solamente una frase de cada una. Tenemos, me parece, mucho para avanzar en el intercambio de experiencias de enseñanza de la demografía, y tenemos una red que se encarga de eso, pero tenemos mucho para innovar, y creo que alguna experiencia que haya tenido otra asociación nos puede servir mucho. Y con esto me voy, lo más pragmático. Fui de lo más general a lo más pragmático. Esto es lo más pragmático de todo. ¿Cuál sería el incentivo para, por ejemplo, pagar la cuota de la asociación y mantenerse activo como un socio en ese sentido, para alguien que solamente participa en los congresos cada 2 años? Nosotros no encontramos todavía un formato que nos permita incentivar a los socios a año estar presentes en el pago de su cuota y en la vida de la asociación, por el mismo problema que mencionaba antes, porque las actividades entre congreso y congreso son difíciles de pensar para involucrar mucha gente. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Perdón, Georgina, que me fui unos minutos.
Gracias, Nacho. Thank you, Nacho. Welcome to Tom and Donatien that were able to join us. So we are going to continue with Aris Ananta. He's the president of the Population Association. I believe you have a presentation. You can share your screen.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Ignacio, for inviting me. I think you have set a very high standard for the Congress, and it's very difficult for me to follow you. Let me share my PowerPoint. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint? Okay, I will talk about the Asian demographic. Wait a second. Sorry. Asian demographic issues and some activities of the Asian Population Association. First, I like to share with you what we have been doing so that we have virtual conference. Actually, we were supposed to have the 5th conference on 24 to 27 November 2020 in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, 2 weeks ago. We already planned everything to have the conference in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. We work together with the university in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and with the National Board of Family Planning and Population in Indonesia. However, when we heard the pandemic, the COVID-19 went around the world, at the first time we were still optimistic that we could have the conference in Yogyakarta in November 2020. But then the virus came to Indonesia and the government cut the funding for 2020, shifted 2021. Because of that, we postponed the conference to 2021. We thought that the pandemic would have been over at the time. But as we all know, the pandemic is still going on. And then we also heard that even the money will not be available for 2021. So because of that, because of the funding and the economic crisis everywhere in the world and the pandemic, we decided that we will going to have a virtual conference. We already decided that we will have a virtual 3-day conference in 20 to 22 July 2021. So everybody is welcome. In addition to the conference, we and APA conducted several webinars. So far, we have implemented 5 webinars. The first 3 are on Asian families and the COVID-19 pandemic. We conducted in 9 July, 23rd July, and 6 August 2020. The 4th is on COVID-19 and the migrant in Asia, 30 September 2020. The 5th is tomorrow afternoon, Southeast Asian time, on financial adequacy among older people in selected Asian countries, 10 December 2020. You are welcome to attend this webinar, Singapore time, 2 p.m. And there will be more webinars on the pipeline, including employment during COVID-19 and happy and healthy in the old age. We encourage for the institution in Asia to host a joint webinar with APA. Individual members of APA have been also helping with policy making in the country where they reside and or their own government. APA itself doesn't have a formal policy in helping policy making in government in Asia. For example, individually, we are providing suggestion on pension system to the Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. We provided names to be invited as speakers to the Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. And we also provide names for person to be invited for the webinar conducted by Population Policy, in making population policy to the National Board of Population and Family Planning, Republic of Indonesia. This is some example of the activities of the APA during the COVID-19. This is some demographic issues in Asia. As you told us earlier, we don't do a very serious research, but it is just what is in my mind and from members of the council on the most important demographic issues in Asia. First is the large number of population. As I think all of you know that 5 countries in Asia is among the 10 largest countries in the world. We have China, is the largest, having the largest number of population in the world. We have India, second largest number of population in the world. India will exceed China maybe in 2030. But the other countries, for the other countries, the rank will remain the same. Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. Pakistan is the 5th largest country in the world. Some projection shows that Pakistan, the number in Pakistan will exceed Indonesia maybe in 2030 or 35 or 2040. Bangladesh is the 8th largest number of population. These large numbers can be both challenge and opportunities, depending on social, economic, political, and technological condition. It can create poverty, it can create opportunity, like in China, it has become big opportunity. The big number of population is no longer a burden, but it's becoming opportunity. In other countries, the issue are the same, whether they can use the large number of population as burden or opportunities. But currently, I believe that many countries are seeing this large number of population more as opportunities than challenges, especially when they are talking about a large number of working age population. Another issues is that in some countries and region of countries in Asia, they face very low fertility and aging population. We heard about China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. They are all having very low fertility. Not only that, even in a country like Indonesia, which fertility rate is still a little bit higher than replacement level, but in many regions in Indonesia is already below replacement level. Not only they face very low fertility below replacement level, but they experience out migration to some rural area in Indonesia and in India, for example. The population is very old because of very low fertility and out migration. The question in many countries and region having this low fertility and aging population is that whether they are ready to support them, the older population, older people, and whether they are able to use them as opportunity. Some people age 65 and over is a burden for the economy, but many studies in Asia show that older people in Asia are still very productive. They are still working. They are helping the grandchildren. They are even transferring money for the children. So I think the issue is now how to use them as an opportunity. The second issue rising in Asia is, I think everywhere in the world, is the emergence of short-term population mobility and virtual mobility. Migration trajectory will be declining, replaced by short-term population mobility because of the advance in technology. And now, after the pandemic came to us, we will see that virtual mobility may dominate population mobility. People are already talking whether after the pandemic is over, we will continue with virtual mobility or we will return to the in-person mobility. Some people think that, younger person especially think that virtual mobility may dominate, but they will have a hybrid between the traditional population mobility and virtual mobility. But some other say that they don't like virtual mobility. But this is the issue now in some countries in Asia. After the pandemic, what will we have in population mobility? We have online teaching now everywhere. I am in Brunei, but I am teaching in Indonesia. Will it continue after the pandemic is over? Another issue is provision of contraceptive services during the pandemic. In some countries, the provision of contraceptive is focused on short-term contraceptive. And in a country like Indonesia, for example, currently they have problem of providing contraceptive because the contraceptive is short-term. With the pandemic, shift of the focus of the health sector to the pandemic has resulted in unavailability of short-term contraceptive services. Another issue is the confusion on demographic bonus or dividend. Many people, especially policymakers, always talk about demographic bonus and demographic dividend, but they misunderstand the concept. They think the bonus is already there, dividend is already there, and it's just pick them. They do not understand that the bonus dividend actually did not already exist. It is a potential. So it gives some euphoria, but the reality is not that good. and people are already confused on the measurement of demographic bonus dividend. 65 and over is a burden, under 15 is burden, or under 25. Who are the productive and unproductive population? Simply by age. In some Asian country, a large number of young people result in uncertainty and instability, chaos, riot, and so on. So now it is a debate in some Asian country. The last issue I like to share is political demography. I learned this from my friend James from Mumbai, and talking about race, ethnicity, religion, and language is emerging issues politically in many Asian countries. First, about fertility differential. In some society, the fertility is higher than the others, and therefore the society with lower fertility is afraid that the demographic composition will change. It happened in India, it happened in Indonesia, it happened in other countries in Southeast Asia. Population mobility. Population mobility, this is following the Coleman in 2006 about the third demographic transition, is happening in Asia too. Population mobility resulting in changing population composition, not only in the country as a whole, but in the region within the country. In Papua, maybe you heard now there is a political tension there in Papua, Indonesia, because they are not happy with the influx of migrants from outside Papua within Indonesia, because the people in Papua have different race, they have different religion and language. Mixed marriage. In some country, mixed marriage is thought to change the population composition by religion, and then can change political situation in the country. This fertility differential, population mobility, and mixed marriage may result in changing population composition by race, ethnicity, religion, and language. It's happening in Asia. This is challenging for Asia today on the political demography. I think that's all what I like to share. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you so much for keeping track of the time. Well, I have to say that it seems to be a problem with the translation. No, not with the translation, with the audio. So I apologize while trying to fix that. Hay un error, un inconveniente técnico con aparentemente no está saliendo el audio de la traducción en el... now I hear now.
Sí, ahora está funcionando.
Ay, genial. Bueno, era cuestión de decirlo y se solucionaba. Bueno, lo siento. Ok. Le voy a pasar la palabra a Jonathan Begui, que es de la Asociación Africana de Población. Welcome, Donathan. Thank you so much for joining us. If you can make your presentation in 12 minutes, so we have time for the people to make questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Georgina. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to ask you also for inviting us to participate in this conversation. And as the Union for African Population and Studies, we are very much able to share our experience and in convening or working together with our members to promote the use of population or evidence on population development for policies and programs in Africa. Well, we were, the Union for African Population Studies was created in 1984 at the initiative of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And the main idea is to promote the scientific study of population and the application of research findings in developing planning in Africa. And as of today, we have about 2,000 members, scientists and researchers in Africa and based in other parts of Africa. And the main mission for us is to strengthen networking and also the capacity of professionals to generate, communicate, and also use evidence-based population information. And really we do that through the supporting the training of the next generation of researchers, also creating a platform for researchers to network and share also their knowledge, promote evidence-based policies and programs, and dialogue among population and development practitioners and scientists. But also, more importantly, we want to foster the visibility of scientific research or African population. We are based currently, for many years, we are based in Senegal. We are currently based in Dakar, in Accra, in Ghana. And our work revolves around our research, capacity building, as I indicated, but also dissemination. So in terms of research, what we generally do, we work through our thematic panels. For many years, they were known as research network thematics. And the main aim really was to promote research, capacity building, and policy dialogue in 5 specific areas of specialization in population development. It has evolved over time. Today, we looked at the issues related to fertility and environment and development, migration, census, capabilities approach in population studies, but also computational social science. And the work of these thematic panels has over time been only affected also by the fact that the funding has been dwindling over time. So at the beginning, maybe 20 years ago, it was working well, but today it has been tragically negatively affected by the lack of funding that we used to receive from our donors. So this has usually organize research seminars and capacity building workshops and coordinate the publication of the research outputs in different journals, including the African Population Studies Journal. In terms of capacity building, we started off with what we used to call the small grants program. It has been very successful because of the funding that we used to have, but now it has also changed, and our main capacity building is now done mainly through our thematic panels, but also during our conferences that we organize every 4 years. And it has really helped, despite all the problems, to create a critical mass of African researchers who can, provide very good research, including collecting the data and conducting the analysis and developing papers and reports that can be disseminated. In terms of dissemination, we have the African Population Studies Journal that was created to help us to help African scholars disseminate the research outputs. It's published twice a year in April and November. Currently, it's been at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, and it has been really a great initiative and great opportunity for helping young and experienced African scholars to disseminate the research outputs. And it's still we are currently thinking of ways of given the current situation and trying to see how this can be the management can be improved to help improve also the outputs that we get from this initiative. One of our key platform or initiative that use is what we call the African Population Conference, that is organized every 4 years, it's the main aim is really to provide a platform to share to African scholars and program implementers, policymakers, and to network, but also to engage and share and disseminate the research findings on population and development issues, and also explore ways of using these findings to improve policies and programs that are aimed at improving the well-being of people in Africa. And definitely it has been really very good. It has provided for many years a platform, an opportunity for capacity, for also capacity building activities that get African scholars. So far, we've organized 8 conferences. The last one was organized in 2019, in November 2019 in Entebbe in Uganda. Usually these conferences are hosted by African governments, so we always work with specific African governments that we collaborate with, and it was organized by the Ugandan government last time. We try to organize it on a rotational basis between regions, so as you move from east to west, and also since you are a bilingual organization, bringing together French-speaking and English-speaking members, we try to move also between these two different regions. It's usually, as many of the conferences that we know, it's organized around formal sessions, but also training session, roundtable discussions, and side meetings on very specific topics. The last conference, for example, was organized a week before the ICPD plus 25 that was dating 25 years after the International Conference on Population Development in Cairo. And the idea for us is to provide a platform for our members to discuss how Africa can, African researchers and stakeholders working on population development can harness our unique population dynamics for sustainable development 25 years after Cairo and beyond. And I think we had a very good turnout and given the topic, and UN organizations like UNFPA and many NGOs and other organizations interested in this topic up to Entebbe to discuss with many other stakeholders about how we can learn from what we've done since Cairo, and how we can look ahead based on the lessons that we learned so far. Our partners for many years benefited from different funders and partners. Things are, like the foundation that the foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, Gates Foundation, UNFPA, UN organizations that UNFPA were created at the initiative of the Economic Commission of Africa. So we strive also to work with these regional organizations that are interested in Africa's development, the African Development Bank, the African Union. I must say it has not been easy to get them on board. It's always the bridging the gap of creating this bridge between researchers and policymakers has not been always easy, but we strive, we tried really to ensure that the connections remain, and one of the key objectives of the new council that was expected in 2019 was to really ensure that we get back to the board and to the table of this interregional organization to see how UAPS can work with its members to have its voice heard about population and development in Africa. We also work with different organizations, sister organizations like the IUSSP, the Population Association of America, organizing sessions during their meetings, and also get them involved in supporting us in running our activities and so forth. So in terms of look, the issues that we address, when UAPS was created in 1984, Africa has been uplink the issue of population growth, high level of fertility, and so forth. And of course, today, despite some improvement, it's still on the agenda of many governments. And if you look at the latest estimations by the UN, the population of Africa is expected to double, roughly double by 2050. So we'll have more than 1.2 billion people by 2050 that will be added to the 1.3 billion that we had by 2019. And the issue really also is about, high fertility. It is even by very high desired family size, low level of use of modern contraception, high levels of adolescent fertility. And these are the issues that people have been trying to look at and trying to, find solutions. This is what we know. So what can we do? What interventions and actions can we put in place to ensure that we find a solution to this issue in Africa? It's not about, the issue is not just about the high level of fertility, but the issue is about how it affects also the levels of poverty, for example, and the quality of life, for example, in the continent. Yeah, the issue that, many African countries have been grappling with, some related there's early marriage, early childbearing, for example. These are issues that we need to look at, and I think they are issues that many African scholars have been trying to address in their studies. In terms of family planning, about 1 in 4 women on the continent have an unmet need for family planning. That is that they want to stop or delay childbearing for a certain time. Well, yes, but they don't have access to family. So what can we do to ensure, and what do we know about that? What works? What are the interventions that can be used, actions that can be replicated somewhere in other parts that we learn from other parts of the world, and maybe other parts of Africa that can be replicated somewhere else in Africa. So these are some issues that have been discussed in the continent over the past few years. There is a focus on demographic dividend. It's also look, how can Africa harness the youthness of its population to economic growth and sustainable development? For many countries, one of my colleagues who talked earlier mentioned the misunderstanding about the demographic dividend. For many people, if you have a youthful population, you have a demographic dividend. And I think one of the key things that scholars have been trying Africa to make policymakers understand is not just about having a youthful population. You need to have the conditions. You need to educate that youthful population, provide them with, make them healthy, that create jobs for them that are in adequation with their skills, put in place the governance mechanisms to ensure that they are able to get the jobs and operate in a conducive environment. So there's much focus on demographic dividend. There have been much focus on demographic dividend over the past few years. And again, today the discussion is about how much this COVID-19 situation has contributed as, or is sort of reversing the gains that some of the African countries have made, or the progress they have made over the past few years towards achieving that, realizing it, or creating at least the conditions for realizing a demographic dividend. Services, for example, in terms of sexual and reproductive health, may not be working properly. Education, people, although they say that Africa has not been much affected by the COVID-19 situation because of the youthful population, at the same time, the same population is not going to school, for example, is not getting the jobs or losing the jobs. So what is it? How can we really look at these situations and all these issues and discuss as scholars for the African population? But I think I not have much time to continue the conversation, but these are some of the issues that really we are trying to address these days. African scholars are trying to address. There are many issues, and we work with different organizations. Next year, you'll organize at the Population of Association of America meeting session that looks really at how at the linkage between COVID-19 and African demography. We look at the issue of data has been a recurrent issue in Africa. You also want to discuss it and see how else you can improve the systems in Africa to ensure that our national statistical offices, line ministries, and other stakeholders work together to ensure that we get the data at the right time. This also affects for example, the response to COVID-19 and the recovery strategy. So these are some of the issues that are on our desk and that we would like to work with several other stakeholders to address. Our challenge is really, as an association, is I believe this affects other associations, the funding. We had some issues since 2003, where many of our major donors, because of some issues they had with our systems. We are working towards addressing those issues, and we really hope that based on the willingness of other donors to support us to organize the last conference and to understand some of the issues that need to be addressed in the continent, we will be able to get back on our feet and get some and work together to ensure that our programs and activities are well funded. So, well, not
Okay.
much, I don't want much to dwell on the other things, but this is briefly what I would like to share with you. UAPS has been really been able to provide a uniquely African perspective to question of population on the continent. There you have difficult times, and we look forward to seeking other partnerships, working with other sister organizations, population associations, to establish formal relationships with regional bodies and so forth, to ensure that we are in a position that we can use the critical mass of researchers that we have to make us to address the issues the African continent is confronted to. So thank you very much. This is what I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, for giving us the African perspective. And well, we've been in Latin America, Asia, Africa. Now we move to Europe. So I welcome and thank Elga Balk. She's the president of the European Population Association. And we are all ears. I'm sorry, 1 second. In case you want to ask questions, you can start putting them in the chat. I will read. You can put it either in English or in Spanish. Si quieren ir adelantando preguntas para alguno de los ponentes, lo pueden poner en el chat. No, sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, a big thank you to the organizers of Alap for organizing this event and starting this dialogue. I think it's really great and much appreciated. So I really think it's a wonderful initiative that you took and to bring us together here today. And in that sense, I think the virtual way of communicating even facilitates this now a bit more than otherwise would have been possible. So much appreciated, and it works really well. Congratulations on all that. Our conversation, I think, is also much needed in a world that's ever more connected. And today I would like to share with you some of the insights and backgrounds on the European Association for Population Studies. Secondly, to say a little bit on European demography and the issues that are on our table. And third, to have a little bit of an outlook for the future. Well, let me start by sharing some insights of the European Association, bringing together scholars in the broad field of population studies. We exist since 1983, and over the past 37 years, the association has basically expanded and evolved. But the key aim has remained the same, to be the key association in the field and bringing together individuals and organizations to be an interdisciplinary population studies association with a focus on Europe, but not necessarily limited to Europe. We currently have around 750 members, and we have different activities that we carry out. Under the auspices of the European Association, we have a couple of activities going. And obviously, like also the other associations have pointed out, we have our biannual European population conferences. Unfortunately, the last one in 2020, which was supposed to happen in June in Padova, had been cancelled due to the COVID situation. But we're already planning for the next one in 2022 in Groningen in the Netherlands. Bringing together scholars just every other year is probably not enough. So that's why we have other activities as well. And we have a recently started PhD network where young scholars can get together and meet each other and exchange also in the in-between years between the conferences. It's a recent initiative, and we hope to have in 2021 the first bigger event as part of the PhD network. And I think it also shows the ever-growing importance of the training of young scholars in our field, to also make sure that also towards the future we have a vibrant research community in the field of demography. One of the initiatives that have been taken already quite a while ago and has been running now for a couple of decades already is the European Doctoral School for Demography. It is hosted in a different location every 2 years. Currently, it's hosted in Barcelona, Spain, and it has been going on under auspices of IUSSP, and we get applications from all around the world. But it's a training of young people doing their first step into, after a master, going into a PhD and getting a common training. We have about 20 students every year who are following this and who also find their way into the demographic community after that. Furthermore, the association has working groups that are tackling different sub aspects of the broad field of population studies, ranging from mortality to migration to also recently a new initiative, for example, on child and adolescent development. The association furthermore has a flagship journal, the European Journal of Population. I will invite you to have a look at that and also send in your manuscripts there. It's published 5 times a year, and we very much welcome also work that is beyond Europe. And finally, we are founding part in Population Europe, which is a collaborative network of European leading demographic centers to share basically facts and findings from research to the wider field, and the wider field in general towards policymakers and potential politicians and journalists, for example, to link really the discussions that are going on at a societal level with our knowledge and insights that we can provide from population research. Well, this brings me to my second point. What are the demographic challenges in Europe? Well, I think it's clear what we are facing in Europe is lower birth rates and aging populations. And as a result, the aging and these limited numbers of birth make that we have a shrinking population in the future. In some parts of Europe, this is already more felt than in other countries, and in some regions even more than in others. Nevertheless, we will all face this relatively soon. Demographic knowledge as such is key to tackle the many challenges that are related to this, and they're probably even more needed in times of COVID, where the pandemic clearly shows to have an additional effect on these challenges that we have had. What is clear, populations declining, but they're also getting more diverse. If I would have taken you back to like 9 months ago, and you would have talked to many people in Europe in the start of 2020, probably most of them would have said the major challenge we're facing is migration. And interestingly, you can see that within just a couple of months, this has changed to a totally different challenge, namely the pandemic and the related effects it has on populations in the broad sense. At least in the public debate, migration is very present also in the European case. And I think it's important that we as demographers not just follow the hysteria of these kind of public debates, but also share our insights in a broader sense and show that how the 3 components of demography all have an equally important impact on the population structure of the future. And you see with the COVID pandemic that this indeed can be turned around quite rapidly and within a short time span. So looking at fertility, births and deaths, as well as migration is important. And we as demographers have a role there to also steer these public debates in a good sense. The effects of COVID are still largely unknown, obviously, to what extent it will have a larger and major impact also towards the future. The short-term effects are clear. They have a huge impact on all of us, and it's also one of the reasons why we're sitting here, most of us from home behind our computers. But what are the long-term consequences for individuals, for families, for society at large? And Iris was also referring that it might lead to less migration in the future. Well, in the European case, we saw a small drip in the number of mobility earlier this year, but it already has come back also to almost the same levels in some areas. So is this really going to have a long-term effect? Well, these questions we need to answer, and this brings me to the third point I would like to share with you today in this short speech, and that relates to the fact that we need to be able to share and generate demographic data and analyze them together. Supportive data infrastructures is key and essential if we want to be able to answer the challenging questions of the future. And we need to join forces across borders because these questions are not limited to one country, they're not limited to one continent. They are basically all addressing all of us in one way or another. And they're linked between all those different continents, countries, and regions. So what is done, for example, in the Gender and Generation program, where a research infrastructure is built to study family relations, is much needed and also needed to be initiated in other domains and at a wider level. Finally, the world is more connected than ever, and we as demographers also need to connect across borders. And in my inaugural speech as the president of IUSSP earlier this year, I mentioned that this is also needing to be that we are inclusive and diverse associations at the continental level, but also at a broader level. We are part of society and we cannot ignore what is going on in the society at large. The COVID pandemic even more has shown that we are depending on each other in that regard. For the future, we need to secure that we keep emphasizing inclusion in all different ways. This includes, for example, inclusion in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of skin color, but also across continents. So whatever boundary we may draw, we need to think about them in the future. In order to do so, we need to be able to draw and rely on each other. And in this regard, I really think this initiative is really a great example to start this exchange. And I really think this is extremely important also towards the future. I therefore would already like to invite all of you to the 2022 European Population Conference and continue this conversation, not just there, but hopefully also in the year in between, but at least there also to join each other and see how we have been doing since today and look backwards at the 2 years and look ahead after 2022. So you're most welcome and thanks again for this initiative. It was an honor to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helga. Thank you for keeping so well with the time. Now I give the word to Tom Legrand, who is the president of IUSSP. So he, like we were saying when we were preparing this meeting, we think he will talk about the world. He doesn't represent one region in particular. So I give you, again, if you want if you have a question, you can leave it in the chat. Tom.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the Alap Scientific Committee again for their idea of putting together this session. I think it's very valuable and I think it's something that should be repeated. I also want to admit that while I'm thrilled to be here, I really wish I was in Valparaiso, which I think is a lot nicer than my office, especially when it's cold and miserable outside in Montreal. For what I'm going to do is just rapidly present some quick considerations about the IUSSP and associations, regional associations, and then move on to research priorities now and in the future. For all of us, the COVID crisis has been an enormous shock since it began in earnest about 9 months ago. At least in the short term, it's transformed research priorities for demographers across the world. And in addition, as people have mentioned, it has caused tight budgets caused by deficit spending and economic recessions. And this is affecting also donor priorities and putting real pressure in many ways on the work done by demographers and by the associations. Population researchers are also very rapidly reviewing their research priorities, and many are turning to topics related to COVID. Issues related to pandemics, crisis, resilience, and good evidence, the need for data and rigorous methods are likely to take more space in future years. The IUSSP, like the other associations, has been forced to move very rapidly all of our activities online, scientific panel seminars, workshops, the ongoing Population Poverty and Inequality Conference, and our signature event, the International Population Conference, which was planned for Hyderabad next December. It will take place. It will be a hybrid conference, but the very large bulk of it will be online. I think there are advantages to this. We've been forced to move very hurriedly in a direction that we wanted to go anyway. For environmental reasons, to reduce the environmental ecological footprint of travel, ease access to events across the world. Clearly, the number of participants has risen given the cyber events. We have also had several webinars on topics that otherwise we would not have done, and this is enriching for the entire membership. Disadvantages, however, are many, and I think everybody knows them. There's we're missing in on-site, in cyber events, the extremely important informal get-togethers and networking that occurs and which is so important for younger scholars, the ease of talking with top demographers from across the world. In addition, activities like hands-on training workshops are much less amenable to cyber events than to being done on site. For us, we have some other problems that don't affect all of the regional associations. Some parts of the world have poor internet access. What do we do about that? For Africa, we're thinking for the International Population Conference, maybe having in a few countries get-togethers in hotels that have very good access so that people can participate. Time differences. It's a little bit hard when you, this is a problem for this specific session, but it's going to be a general problem. How do you put together people from China and Eastern United States, for example, or Brazil? Hybrid conferences, we're moving towards a hybrid conference. They are much harder than pure cyber conferences or on-site conferences. For example, breakout rooms only exist in cyber space and are not amenable to hybrid conferences, or not so amenable. We're all forced to seek to learn rapidly new methodologies and to find new funding. There are significant new costs in terms of software and technical assistance, as I'm sure Alap can talk to also. It's unclear if members in general are going to be willing to pay as much in registration fees, especially if, even if you're presenting. And for the IUSSP at least, we have a secretariat. Given our need to translate things, our need to accommodate, work with members from across the world, we need to have a secretariat that costs money. And the IPC, International Population Conference fees, are one of our main ways of getting funding for our work over time. If that no longer is possible, what do we do? What was mentioned is there is a massive number of webinars. I probably spend an hour a day receiving emails and requesting the IUSSP to put them on our events calendar. And I'm probably only getting a third of these. It can take almost full time just to list the webinars, not to speak of actually participating in the webinars. I'm not going to describe the IUSSP activities per se, except to just invite you to take a look at our website. We are involved in a lot of things. As I mentioned, funding is an ongoing concern. Donors are changing their priorities. Donors are changing the way they're giving money. I think the work of associations is not as high a priority as in the past. And this is posing real challenges. We are working to address them, as I imagine all the other associations are doing, but this is a work in progress. The IUSSP has always sought to support and develop collaborations with regional associations, something we would really like to expand upon in the current context. In the future, why not an international population conference joint with a regional conference? That might be a way to go. Joint memberships were brought up. How can we act better to support you and to also create synergies between our organizations? Last thing I want to mention here briefly is a reflection together on training needs. There will be a roundtable on this topic tomorrow. Recently, in the last few decades, there's been a real concern of how do you maintain core demographic training that is so important and yet accommodate the expanding interest. At that time, it was econometrics and the use of individual data. Right now, you've got the massive expansion of new data sources, big data. And how do you there's a real interest on the part of young demographers to get involved in this. How can we accommodate them while preserving the core demography that is so important? This is very important for research programs, but also important for master's level professional programs. And I think there's a need to reflect on this together. I want to mention that in my view, for the associations and also for population scientists on the whole, the pandemic offers real opportunities and real risks in terms of research. Opportunities, it's a chance for demographers to demonstrate the value of our approach to university administrations, to funders, to potential students, and of course, to the general public. Demographers have a great deal to offer for the study of COVID-19, especially in terms of measurement, excess mortality by strata, studying social, racial, ethnic, and gender disparities that have become very clear in recent months, and examining the pandemic's many effects on socio-demographic and economic variables. The pandemic has also put to the forefront the value of serious analysis based on hard data, something that demographers do very well. Risks, I'm worried we may see a repeat of what happened in the 1990s when the arrival of HIV/AIDS pandemic caused public and private donor funding to focus very heavily on medical and public health research, acting to reduce funding and the attention to broader reproductive health issues, and more generally to demographic issues. Tight budgets and altered priorities are likely to pose problems for maintaining research and training activities that are not directly linked to the pandemic, and maybe also those done by demographers that are linked to the pandemic. In my view, it is extremely important that the population research community, including regional associations, do all we can to take our place in research, aiming to assess and then address the effects of the pandemic, and to do it rapidly. The unique training and skills of demographers are of real value to this research and for policy. And we must not leave the entire stage to public health and medical experts. We need to affirm that we have something to say that is important and to take our place in this. Okay, I have 6 more minutes, I think, 6, 7 more minutes. Talking about more broad research priorities and big issues. Obviously, all of the topics that have interested demographers in recent years before the arrival of COVID remain very important, and it is very important for us to continue working in those areas. In my view, though, I think 4 topics are likely to receive more attention in the future, and one of these, to a certain extent, I think is an area that demographers have not been very present to date. These are aging and population decline in some parts of the world, population development and the environment, poverty and inequality, and migration and cities also. And all of these, underlying all of these, are rapid innovations in data and methods. These are topics that in varying degrees have are important to regions across the world, and in varying degrees also are affected by COVID. Aging, I don't think I need to say much about it. Several years ago, a survey of demographers across the world showed that all regions of the world viewed aging as the most important issue, with the exception of sub-Saharan Africa. It's obvious that this is a very major issue that affects populations and policy in countries across the world. It's also possible that COVID has accelerated aging, especially in societies with lower fertility settings. There is some evidence that fertility is falling because of COVID. Is this true? What is the extent of the fall? Is this permanent or temporary? How does it happen across social groups, age groups? And what are its effects for tempo and quantum? These are big issues. Another topic which I mentioned, which has not received a great deal of attention so far, I think, but is becoming important in Europe and some other areas, is managing population decline due to low fertility and the outmigration of often skilled youth, leaving very aged populations behind. Poverty and inequality has also been received more attention due to the pandemic, which brought to light the dramatic disparities in societies across the world. A recent study by the UN and Oxford University researchers estimated that the pandemic can push nearly 500 million people in 70 countries into poverty, reversing a decade in progress. World Bank, which has a more stringent definition of poverty, estimated that this year between 71 and 100 million people have been pushed into extreme poverty once again. How do people alter their behaviors in these situations, and what are the consequences for demographic outcomes? Increased poverty and lockdowns are also having major effects on specific groups, adolescents and women in particular. For example, in some settings, worsening poverty seems to have led to permanent school dropouts of girls and an increase in early marriages for them, with long-term obvious consequences for their welfare and subsequent behaviors. Migration and urbanization, there are obvious effects of the pandemic on this. Many countries have largely stopped legal documented migration overnight, with major consequences for those who could not immigrate, for their families, and for both host and origin societies. How will this work out as the pandemic ends? Internal migration has also been affected by lockdowns at times. But I recall in the 1980s, I believe it was in Brazil, the major long-term trend towards rural-urban migration was a reversal. There was net migration to countryside. I believe at the same time, a similar trend was documented for Ivory Coast. Anecdotally, the same thing is happening in India today. How is the pandemic changing these major long-term trends, and to what extent will these disappear once the pandemic disappears, or may they perhaps continue? Cities. Demographers have never really focused a great deal of effort in general on cities, on urban areas. However, according to UN projections, more than 100% of population growth in the world will occur in cities. There will be a net decline in rural populations in rural areas, and most of these are going to occur in South Asia, maybe Central Asia, and especially Sub-Saharan Africa. DHS data does not provide enough observations or the variables you need to study cities. And yet cities are enormously heterogeneous that affect behaviors and outcomes of interest to us. I think this is an area for which we need to really focus on much more so. See, I don't have a lot of time. I'll try and finish rapidly. Population, the environment, and development, something that Donatien brought up. And I suspect that the issue of population and the environment is going to be the most important issue in international discussions progressively in future years, that the next iteration of the Sustainable Development Goals will put a great deal of attention on this topic. In Africa, this should be expanded, of course, to the demographic dividend, development prospects, the youth boom, evolving age structure. Obviously, population growth, settlement patterns, and consumption patterns, especially in high and middle income countries, are having huge impacts on efforts to protect the natural environment, and it's an issue to us. However, I think a lot of the focus in future years will be more how do populations adapt to changes in the environment, changing rainfall patterns, changing ocean levels, changing temperature is going to have massive effects on health and nutrition, migration, settlement patterns, and the such. Lastly, data and methods. All of the topics demand excellent data and rigorous analysis. As I recall several years ago, Caldwell said that of all the social sciences, demography is the one that is most directly concerned by data and data quality. In recent years, there have been very major advances in this area, some of which are narrowly demographic in nature and are well known to demographers, like the development of the human mortality database. However, in my view, the mass of advances in this area is not in that, on those sorts of topics, but are occurring more in the periphery of our field. And it is urgent that demographers assume a much bigger role in this work. There is a real need for demographers to invest in new methods and new types of data, verifying them, linking them to traditional data like censuses and surveys, and then using them. These data range from social media data, Max Planck is playing a real important role in this, satellite data, Cezanne, WorldPop, Flowminder are doing a lot of work in this area, new spatial data approaches, new data collection approaches using cell phones and other methodologies, innovations in civil registration and vital statistics systems with legal ID, and all of the associated methodological advances. Formal demographic training in the complex interactions between population structures and flows, population dynamics, along with our long tradition on focusing on data quality, devising estimates for key variables in situations of efficient data. Think of all the brass estimators. And making use of data from different sources makes us very well suited to this work. And I think there's a need for us to take our place in this work. These are also methods that strongly interest many young demographers, and I'm convinced that this will be an area that will rapidly grow in importance in upcoming years. Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you, Tom. Well, we have a few minutes, so I don't know whether there's some questions. Somebody want to break the ice, like we say, or any of the regional panelists want to say something about what Tom mentioned. It's kind of free. I don't know how, you can tell me but if you want to, Nico, you want to speak? Yeah, go ahead. You can open your microphone.
Okay, thank you very much. It was really a great session. I was really impressed by all the presentations. And what strikes me is the very rich diversity of experience across the world. And on the other hand, the similarities of all the experiences. And there are so many issues that were touched upon. It's very difficult to make a choice, but from an organizational perspective, I'd like to ask 2 points or raise 2 points that are raised by several, among others, Ignacio. So why would people want still to be a member of our organizations? Because across the globe, I think we see a membership decline, and with all these online events, it's not going to be more easy. So how are we going to make our associations more attractive to new members, and not only younger people, but to keep our so that's one of the major questions that we have to deal with. And the other is that almost everybody raised is the massive amount of events that we're having, and we need some kind of coordination and some kind of trying to deal with this enormous amount of activities. So that's I think that's what we need to address. And the way forward is, of course, how we started today is to continue the dialogue and to learn from each other experience and to share more. And that's I'd like to keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Any other question before I?
May I comment to Nico?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Nico. Yeah, and I think I share the same thing with you, that the interest on membership of population association is declining. The interest of people to join the membership is because to meet the people in person and also to do tourism. But now with the COVID-19, the attraction for tourism is lost. Before the pandemic, we in Asia Population Association was planning to give fellowship to the retired demographers. Before, we only provide fellowship to the young demographer, but with aging population, with the aging demographer, we were also thinking of providing a fellowship for retired demographer. The problem today is that how, if the COVID-19 continues and we couldn't go back to the tradition conference, we have to create more incentive people to join a conference like this. I think that's my point. And I still do not know what to do in the future to attract more people to do so. The only thing for the APA conference is that many people like to get more publication, and that is a credit for them in the university. That's the attraction. It seems that they like to have to join the conference. Thank you.
Susana.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this very nice session. I think you all touched on this point, but I would like to ask this $1 billion question. If you have 1 or 2 advices to give the associations where to get money to survive, because we know it's going to be very difficult to survive from membership. What would be, and how can each association help each other with these hints about getting money to run their business?
Who wants to answer the $1 million question? With that, Tom? Yeah.
I want to hear the answers, but
Everybody wants the answer.
I don't really have a good answer. I think we have problems, kind of a long-term decline in membership. And at the same time, the big donors are moving away from core funding for associations like us. And this makes it much more hard to maintain our activities. At the same time, if we're moving towards cyber events, it may be hard to ask people to pay more to attend a cyber event or even a regular conference so that we can make enough funds to be able to maintain our basic activities. This is not easy. One thing the IUSSP has been doing a little bit, but I don't think this is something that we're made for and that is a good example necessarily for other associations, is we've become a little bit involved in project funds. We've received funding from the Hewlett Foundation that is over now. This is, which was to really push the role of demographers in the data revolution. We are at the last stages of a major project from the Gates Foundation looking at fertility family planning in urban areas in low-income countries. There is overhead that's generated. The overhead is of value, but the Secretariat has to spend a lot of time administrating it, and that means less time for running the association. So this helps a little bit on the edge, but it's not really a solution. I think one thing that is very important, this is a general problem, but it's also a cohort problem, or an age problem, I probably should be saying. That if we can draw in the young demographers, show that there is value, real value of being a member of our associations, they're probably likely to remain members for a long time. If we miss them when they're young, we're going to be in real trouble. Helga was talking about efforts to try and have specific activities aiming towards younger demographers. The IUSSP has started doing this. We have a young demographers group now, but we haven't been as active as we had hoped to be so far. And I think these are hesitant starting ways to try and address the issues. But beyond that, I have no great ideas to help us move forward.
Okay. Helga? Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I also don't have the answer.
To do like this, I see you if you want to talk.
Okay, I didn't know, so I was just kind of like, I'm afraid I also don't have the answer, so I'm sorry to disappoint you right away, but I do have some thoughts. I think, as we have all been saying, and Tom was also mentioning this, there are tons of initiatives now going on, and they have always been. Being in the field of migration, I could fill my whole day with just attending migration conferences for whatever reason and organized by tons of people. So we might also think a little bit more of joining forces. And instead of trying to do everything ourselves, we can also join forces with other associations and reach out and kind of make it bigger in that way. Tom was also addressing partially, we should also show that we have something to say in certain domains where we probably normally would not be invited or not be on the stage. So joining forces would be a way probably not to give you the $1 million right away, but it can be a way of also kind of really showing the importance of demography in a wider sense and also help us to organize things in that sense. So that was my first thought. Secondly, I fully agree with what Tom also mentioned, I think, and which I also addressed in what I was saying. We need to also think in how the young scholars can be attached to us. And I think starting a PhD network or starting an early career group is really essential. These scholars have specific needs that others probably in association have less, or at least in a different way. Trying to really link them to us will be an important way also to maintain them in the future and kind of create solidarity. And I think in that regard, it's not just to us, but it's probably the wider academic community where more and more emphasis is on just getting published in peer top journals and not care about anything else. I think we need to change that attitude. People are part of a community and they also should contribute to that. They benefit from it and they kind of create and recreate a community. And I think for us, it's important to also emphasize this. And that is not just for us as an association, but in a wider sense as PhD supervisors, as postdoc supervisors. This is something I think we should learn and kind of transmit to the next generation. And for me, that is also a way of trying to really kind of probably have at a low cost associations running also over generations. And that's much needed, I think. So those two are not your $1 million, but probably they can help a little bit.
Thank you, Elia. Susana?
Yeah, I was just going to mention the experience of PAA if you are thinking if it's a good way to go, that they have this donation, that maybe people or young scholars don't have the money to keep the membership, but they have this donation or matching up or doing some, put someone there so people can raise money on the name of that scholar, or old scholars having money can donate, and so, or having different ideas of donation from membership. Would be that possible in Africa, Asia, or Latin America? Or I don't know why IUSSP in that case would be more difficult, I think, but for the regionals, what do you think?
Thank you. Donathan wanted to speak too.
Yeah. Just one quick thing regarding young scholars. My personal experience show that perhaps there is not much connection or experience in terms of linking research findings and policy making or actions and things. And I believe for some of, and especially for our association, this is one thing that it's important to focus on, and sometimes it creates also the need for policymakers and for them to ensure that perhaps research continue being funded, and that they can rely on those young generations or those young scholars or the researchers in the graphic and information studies who generate, who produce these findings. And once they see that the young researchers can convince them and they can work on hand in hand about using the research findings for policy making and programmatic actions. I believe that can help also a bit. It's not an easy thing to do. We sometimes, for us, is about going to a conference and presenting your findings, and that ends. But I think, of course, there has been this movement over the past few years to ensure that it goes beyond that. But I believe we need to do more of that in our association to ensure that there is the connection, the connection between those who produce and those who use research findings is stronger, and that I believe that will help also enhance, the funding research. Thank you.
Sorry, Tom, in 2 minutes, they're going to cut us. So
Okay.
or in case
No,
that happens.
we have up to 1 p.m.
1 p.m. No, I do have to open the other session with Tom as well. No. So
Okay.
don't, I mean, I'm already having a surmenage here.
Okay.
No. So Tom, go ahead.
Okay, well, I hope the other session isn't with me. I thought that was tomorrow. But
No, there is another. Okay, with use at least.
okay. In any case, very rapidly, we had this discussion at the IUSSP and the council. Sorry, I'm probably talking too fast for the board translators. One thing that was brought up is that trying to push a sense of affiliation to the IUSSP in the United States situation isn't going to work. That right now, all of the young, real good doctoral students, all they want is a good CV because they're terrified that they're not going to get a good job. And working with donors who come out of the demographic field often have a very strong sense of affiliation to the demographic community in the IUSSP. It's the complete opposite. And I think one of the things is trying to find ways to develop this feeling of affiliation, that you're part of a community, and this is something that is of value, that is worth preserving. And I don't have any bright ideas about how to do that, but I think exploring ways to reach out to younger demographers is of immense importance, and to find ways to say it is it's of value to you and to what is important to you to become a member of this community over time.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, well, I want to thank you all a lot. It was great. I want this. It's something that we do it ongoing. Well, sorry about my English. We do it in an ongoing basis in these meetings. I think it was great to gather all of us and have our regional perspectives. And thank you so much. And thank you especially for those who have to present in such weird times. Well, thank you. Thank you. I learned we have like this.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tom.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tom,
Yeah.
before you hang out, I see that there is a meeting about that I'm helping out there that says on IUSSP about the International Youth Conference. Were you aware of that?
It's
From
Nico and Mary Ellen is going
That will
there.
be Nick. Yeah, will be me and Mary Ellen. So poor Tom is already overworked.
Okay. It was Tom's name. Okay, I will be helping you over there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll be
thanks.
there
See you
too,
later
but,
then.
Thank
Thanks,
you so much.
everybody.
All right,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aris. Thank you, Elga, so much. Thank you, Tom. Jonathan, I think already hung out.
So
Bye.
now we go out of this meeting, and then we, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And go to
Good.
the platform and come back to the other one.
Okay.
We'll open that. Thank you.